Chapter 4272. Just as the Thunderbolt Immortal's doubts were born, a myriad of phenomena appeared in the surrounding 100 li of space. Farmers plowing the fields, mulberry people raising silkworms, fishermen fishing, hundreds of children chanting, thousands of Buddhas chanting scriptures, and thousands of countries dying. In short, all kinds of worldly phenomena appeared in front of Xiao Hua's eyes. At the same time, a kind of incense that Xiao Hua had never smelled before appeared in his surroundings. This incense was very strange. When Xiao Hua sniffed it, it was as if the entire space was filled with this incense. Moreover, the 100 meridians in his body and the 13200 small points in his body were intoxicated by this incense. A kind of lazy, powerless, and even decadent feeling was naturally born. However, this feeling was only limited to his body. His spirit and thoughts were incomparably active. Previously, Xiao Hua of the heavenly Tao and Xiao Hua of the karma had passed on to him, but now, in just a short moment, they were all absorbed by him. What was special was that the wood, wind, and lightning essences that had just been absorbed by Xiao Hua's body were fusing dozens of times faster than before. Following this fusion, Xiao Hua's mind expanded in all directions without limit, like a leisurely cloud. Kang kang kang. Another wave of sound rang out from an unknown place. Within this sound, pillars of righteous qi were born like sky-reaching peaks, crazily falling into the void. The originally thin righteous qi immediately filled up. Following the righteous qi's birth, the flying flowers actually shattered, turning into a hurricane that fell into Xiao Hua's body. After the time it took to eat a meal, the sound, the 100 forms, and even the light and shadows also shrank, crazily falling into Xiao Hua's body. Kang! Like the sound of a harp breaking, all the light and shadows and illusions disappeared in this sound. At the same time, an even stranger shadow flew out from Xiao Hua's body, landing at the place where the flying flowers were and disappearing. What's going on? The celestial stood blankly in the air, not knowing what to do. As for Xiao Hua, he was dumbstruck. He looked into the distance, his expression like water, not knowing what he was thinking. Sandalwood. Suddenly, Bodhi cried out in alarm. Buddha fire. Buddha fire condensed into Buddha crystal. Is it a crystal smaller than an ant? Golden in color and completely transparent? Xiao Hua asked indifferently. Bodhi's head bobbed up and down like a chick pecking at rice, far from his usual calm demeanor. There are no humans in the great wasteland continent, and we brought the human race in from the ruins. Xiao Hua explained. Now, we've even averted the apocalypse. These disciples of the incense cult have not only inherited the Tao teachings of the Taoist sect, but they've also inherited the flames of our human race. Not to mention the inheritance of the incense cult, the incense merit of the human race belongs to us. Although I didn't create humans for no reason, the merit of opening the heavens and multiplying them belongs to none other than me. Therefore, this flying flower is a phenomenon caused by the descent of righteous energy from the heavens. It is also the beginning of the process of us receiving the merit of splitting the heavens and condensing the godhood. Divine spark. The thunderclap Immortal turned pale with fright. What is a divine spark? It sounds so high and mighty. Xiao Hua shrugged and said with a bitter smile, I don't know either. I reckon it's something that matches the body of a half-god. Fellow Taoist, were you depressed because of this just now? Wen Chu was also somewhat puzzled. No. Xiao Hua shook his head and looked into the distance with some puzzlement. I just felt like I lost something. And the thing I lost is very rare and precious. This feeling is very strange. What did you lose? The thunderclap Immortal couldn't be bothered to ask about the godhood and continued to ask. I don't know either. But I have a feeling that I left this place for myself. As if it was nourished by the so-called merit of opening the heavens and multiplying them. It's too profound. I find it hard to understand. Wen Chu shook his head in puzzlement. However, back then, I received the all-living beings point Wen Chu because of the merit of teaching. Fellow Taoists' merit of opening the heavens must be even more powerful than the merit of teaching, right? I'm afraid that you'll only be able to discover the profoundness of this after charging into the great wasteland continent again. Haha, that's right. Xiao Hua laughed loudly and looked around. Since there was a first time, why can't there be a second time or a third time? When this Xiao comes again in the future, this place will definitely be a new world. Ayo! At this moment, The shamaness suddenly cried out in alarm. Fellow Taoist, I seem to have sensed the spiritual sense mark of the Great Snow Mountain. Can you confirm? Xiao Hua's heart instantly weakened and he asked worriedly. How would I know? The shamaness hurriedly explained. I can only sense the indistinct spiritual sense mark extremely far away. How would I know if it's actually from the Great Snow Mountain or not? Let's go. Xiao Hua suddenly realized. Who cares if it's from the Great Snow Mountain or not? Right now, the most important thing is for us to leave. After saying that, except for the shamaness, all the other clones entered Xiao Hua's body. Xiao Hua and the shamaness simultaneously activated the going south, going north, going south, going north technique and entered the teleportation array under the mountain range. Hurry! Xiao Hua landed in the array and impatiently waved his hand. 9 dragon crystals fell into the teleportation array and then he dragged the Thunderbolt Immortal and Wen Chu out. Together with the shamaness, the 3 clones activated the teleportation array. Under the activation of the 9 dragon crystals, the Soul Cultivator and the Scholar Cultivator gradually found the direction of the teleportation array. Xiao Hua was unable to contain his joy as he entered the teleportation array and shouted, Fellow Taoists, success or failure depends on this one move. Gotcha! At this moment, the teleportation array suddenly rumbled and stopped. The already formed teleportation channel also disappeared. What's going on? Xiao Hua turned pale with fright and asked, Fellow Taoist Wu, what happened? It seems. The shamaness couldn't confirm and hesitated. The teleportation channel seems to have hit something. What did you hit? Xiao Hua was greatly surprised. He pointed at the dragon crystals that had already turned into powder and said, Just hitting something can cause the void channel to collapse? I also don't know. The outside of the wilderness is a turbulent flow of time. Anything strange can happen? The shamaness somewhat helplessly replied. It was really strange. The scene he saw when he fell into the wilderness that day suddenly appeared in Xiao Hua's mind. It was a light and shadow. A thin and tall figure appeared in it. That figure was lying helplessly, holding the sword embryo in its right hand, as if it had already fainted. Beside the figure were the black dog and the yellow marten. After this light and shadow appeared, suddenly an indescribable ripple extended behind the figure. It was similar to the fluctuation of the teleportation channel Xiao Hua used to enter the wilderness. But now that he thought about it, this fluctuation came from behind the light and shadow. In other words, it rushed out from the wilderness. How could it possibly collide with the teleportation channel Xiao Hua entered? That day, when the fluctuation collided with the teleportation channel the light and shadow was in, it produced a strange change. The light and shadow shook and quickly disappeared. Now that he thought about it, he was afraid that it fell into the forward ripple, which was the direction of his teleportation channel. Could it be? Xiao Hua's heart was greatly shaken. Could it be that the thin and tall figure? Is this Xiao who still hasn't obtained the Dawn Rain continent? Fellow Taoist. Not allowing Xiao Hua to think more, the shamaness urged again. Do we still need to activate it now? Of course. A moment ago, Xiao Hua still felt that his future was uncertain. But now, Xiao Hua was full of confidence. He waved his hand and took out 9 dragon crystals instructing, Quickly! Let's activate the array. This time, our target will definitely be the hidden immortal continent. The shamaness, the Thunderbolt Immortal, and Wen Chu's spirits were shaken. They activated the teleportation channel. When a ball of brilliance appeared from the teleportation channel, the shamaness activated the channel, which directly pierced into the void. The 3 clones quickly fell into Xiao Hua's space. When Xiao Hua stepped into the void, he somewhat lingered as he looked at the pitch-black darkness outside the great array. He thought to himself, the wilderness this Xiao is leaving. Perhaps in the future, there will be a chance to come back. Or perhaps, when I come back again, the entire wilderness will be different. As the entire teleportation channel flashed, Xiao Hua's figure disappeared. At the same time that Xiao Hua's figure disappeared, the teleportation channel shook again. A crack actually appeared on the entire teleportation channel. This crack directly pierced into the void and went more than 10 li above the teleportation channel. Immediately, the entire void trembled for a moment and actually froze. The crack in the void existed just like that between the great array and the mountain peak. After an unknown period of time, perhaps 100,000 years or 1,000,000 years, or even 100 million years, that spatial crack once again shook violently, and a resplendent brilliance was born from within the crack. Rumble, rumble, rumble. Like a thunderclap, the entire spatial crack and the array began to distort. Woo! The sound of wind whistling rose again, and within the light and shadow, for extremely long shadows could be seen rushing out from the spatial crack. The one in front was the winged Sakra. The demonic horn of this beast Sakra had already lost its fluctuation. Her figure crashed into the transmission array, and unexpectedly, the transmission array was smashed into pieces. Immediately after, the unconscious figures of Yu Mingxin, Yang Haoya, and Wan Wuxin appeared again. They also crashed into the teleportation channel. The teleportation channel originally had some cracks. At this moment, 3 humans and 1 demon came with the power of teleportation and immediately destroyed the teleportation channel. Where is this place? Several days later, Sakra was the first to wake up. She opened her eyes wide and looked around. Then, she looked at the 3 humans. Her face immediately turned sinister. However, just as she bared her fangs and brandished her claws and was about to pounce on them, the space outside the teleportation channel emitted a strange beast's roar. Sakra was slightly taken aback. She hurriedly flew out of the teleportation channel. When she saw the boiling lava outside and a strange beast with a big body, small head, and slender neck in the lava, she couldn't help but be stunned. Chapter 4273. Stunned, Indra released his devil sense again. Looking at the barren surroundings, he rolled his eyes and said to himself with a smile, "This place is actually not the ruins. Since there is no more fighting, why should I be in such a hurry to kill the 3 of them? Without them, wouldn't this world be too lonely? So what if I play with them?" After saying that, Indra flew away without looking back, no longer paying attention to Yu Mingxin and the other 2. After a few days, Yu Mingxin slowly woke up. She looked around in surprise and even flew out to take a look. Then she hurriedly woke up Wan Wuxin and Yang Haoya and said, "2 senior brothers, wake up quickly. We seem to have left the ruins and arrived at an unknown continent." While Xiao Hua was activating the incense cult's formation, outside the timelight knot of the Eldritch continent, the void in the distance was distorted. Not to mention the stars, even all the light in space were twisted like fried dough twists. It was completely different from the ordinary space. In this folded and distorted space, a black hole suddenly appeared. After this black hole appeared, thousands of light and shadows burst out from the black hole. Indescribable waves filled the entire space within 10,000 miles. Following this wave, a small dot appeared inexplicably. As soon as it appeared, it immediately teleported to the time-light knot. At this moment, the small dot's figure was revealed. It was that triangular monster. This monster was still spinning and had not stopped, but its huge eyes had already opened slightly. When the eyes opened, the folded and distorted space before the light and shadow rushed towards the time-light knot again. Everything within 10,000 miles was covered in it. Behind this huge eye, there was also an even deeper distorted space like a huge tail. The range of this space distortion was so large and so long that there was an extremely large amount of space distortion. Not to mention space cracks, even space collapses could be found everywhere. This kind of collapse and crack affected countless boundaries and barriers. At this moment, the spatial distortion had already collided with the area enveloped by the time-light knot. Although it had yet to truly collide with a light knot, countless specks of light appeared within several 100,000 kilometers. Within the specks of light, all the distorted space immediately stilled, as if it had been smoothed out. Thousands of phantoms appeared within the specks of light. Huff! The triangular monster let out a long sigh that sounded like a breath. Fist-sized bubbles appeared once again within a radius of hundreds of thousands of kilometers. These bubbles didn't look big, but each of them was an independent space. Each space had its own time. Although the time was extremely similar, there were still minute differences. When the spatial bubble appeared, a slight difference in time also appeared, and the time-light spots were immediately disturbed. All the phantoms returned to a distorted space, but this space was instantly destroyed by the triangular monster. Roar! The triangular monster roared and shot out an unparalleled beam of light from its huge eyes. The beam of light was filled with the power of space and some power of time. When the beam of light fell into the time-light knot, the waterfall-like turbulent flow of time actually paused for a moment. Where it paused, the countless phantoms actually condensed together. At this moment, the triangular monster suddenly disappeared. When it reappeared, it actually turned into a phantom and inserted itself between the phantoms that were about to solidify. However, it was only for a moment. The stagnation of the turbulent flow of time was broken by an even more powerful power of time. The phantoms that had condensed once again dispersed, and the entire time light knot returned to its original state. Just as the time knot was activated, the silhouette of a teleportation channel appeared within the light knot. This silhouette split into countless copies in an instant. In just a short moment, these countless silhouettes condensed into one at the edge of the light knot and rushed into the void. The black and white silhouette followed the direction that the triangular monster had flown from, and an inexplicable space collapsed at its huge tail. The moment the silhouette disappeared, the entire enormous distorted space began to recede from the distance like a flood. As it receded, all the spatial cracks and spatial collapses were strangely smoothed out. The vast sea of snow seemed to stretch as far as the eye could see. In addition to the snow on the ground, there were also snowflakes in the sky. The snowflakes were like goose feathers, falling all over the sky. They landed on the mountain peaks in the wilderness, and in the streams that could no longer be seen. The gurgling sound of the streams reverberated in the air, and it was particularly pleasant to listen to in the quiet mountains. Occasionally, the ups and downs of the mountain range would appear in the distance, but it was quickly covered by the nearby mountain peaks. The mountain peaks were not tall, but they were very steep. There were almost no flat paths to climb them. The mountain peaks were not completely covered in snow, and the mountain peaks were not peaceful. As the north wind whistled, it had long blown away the only warmth in the mountain peaks, and the snowflakes that filled the sky also frantically avoided it. When the north wind hit the mountain peaks, it was like a large hand grabbing the accumulated snow and throwing it into the air. As a result, the snowflakes in the air became even more chaotic. When the north wind calmed down, the snowflakes fell again with a rustling sound. The sound of the snowflakes, together with the sound of flowing water, was like a piece of music. The music floated high up in the sky. Wherever the north wind blew, there were bare bluish-black rocks. Occasionally, some dark green roots would poke out from the gaps between the rocks. The injured grass trembled slightly, as if it was intoxicated by the music. At this time, the mountain peaks were a little ugly. They were mottled with some bluish-black spots, and some were pure white. But looking at the pure white spots, it was really a place with thick layers of snow and ice. The ice sculptures and snow on it were very beautiful. In this beauty, there were some strange or ordinary plants, or blooming red plums, or budding spirit flowers, or even green mushrooms that stretched out to the sky to welcome the snowflakes. There were many more. Occasionally, a spiritual beast that looked like a mountain rat would crawl out from the cracks in the mountain rocks and extend its head towards the spiritual flower. However, before it could open its mouth and extend its sharp claws, its extremely bright little eyes turned around vigilantly. Before it could even clearly see what was behind it, a wave of dragon's breath surged towards it like a tidal wave. The spiritual rat's body immediately stiffened as fear appeared in its eyes. It stood dazedly on the ice and snow. At this time, at the bottom of the mountain, in the distance in the endless snow, there was the sound of footsteps on the snow. A monk wearing a kasaya, wearing a pilu hat, and holding a 9-ringed monk staff in his hand, actually stepped on the snow in this pathless wilderness. With a determined and pious face, wasn't this Chun Zong, who was seeking scriptures in the land of bliss? The sound of footsteps crunching was originally ear-piercing, but in this quiet wilderness, combined with the sound of water, wind and snowflakes, it was extremely harmonious. It reverberated in the wilderness, and a new piece of music was played. However, this harmonious piece of music only lasted for a moment. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Another sound came from behind the monk, disrupting the celestial scene. Then, he saw a muscular draconic horse raising its head, walking and jumping as it followed. It looked very lively. The draconic horse's entire body was pure white. Under its mane, faint golden dragon scales could be faintly seen. As the draconic horse jumped, the tail that was dragging behind it would rise from time to time. When it landed, it would sweep across the ground, stirring up a large amount of snow, causing the snow behind it to fly in all directions. On the forehead of the dragon horse, in the thick mane, a dragon horn was revealed. This dragon horn was a little strange. It was actually in the shape of a crescent moon, and there was a faint halo at the tip of the horn. What was even stranger was not this, but on the back of the dragon horse, where the saddle was supposed to be, there was no saddle. Instead, there were many wooden boxes, and the outer layer of the wooden boxes was wrapped in a thick oilcloth, so no one could see what was inside. The wooden box made a dull sound as the draconic horse jumped. It was as if something heavy had been placed inside. Just as the dragon horse passed by, before the flying snow could fall, another huge fire ape followed. This fire ape had an indifferent look on its face. Although it appeared to be indifferent to everything in the world, it allowed the snow to fall on its head, body, and even its messy fur to be covered in snow. The fire ape carried a magic wand on its shoulder, and its hands were placed on the wand. In its mouth, there was a withered grass root, and it was chewing on it in boredom. Although the fire ape's body emitted a kind of carefree aura, its eyes were fixed on the monk in front of the dragon horse, and it was releasing its yuan sense from time to time to be alert of the surrounding situation. This fire ape was no other demon. It was Yuan Tongtian. After Yuan Tongtian passed by, the snow fell, and another cultivator with thick eyebrows and big eyes, dressed in battle armor, walked over with large strides. This cultivator looked at the snow that had just fallen, and his face was filled with disdain. However, he only snorted, and his breath was like a gust of wind, blowing away the remaining snow. He didn't say anything, and looked at the nearby mountain peak with interest, as if he was admiring it. Chun Zong walked in the snow with difficulty. His cloth shoes were already covered in mud and snow, and now they were soaked. Even the lower half of his monk robe was soaked in water, swaying slightly in the wind. Chun Zong walked a few steps, then paused for a moment. He stood there and took a few deep breaths, then gritted his teeth, and continued to walk forward. Seeing this, the dragon horse behind him opened its mouth and said in human language, "Monk, do you still think of me as a disciple? I followed you from so far away just to be your mount. How could you turn a blind eye to me? It's fine if you can fly, but you only know how to walk with your feet. I am the Eastern Sea's 10th prince. Do you think it's easy for me to serve you? You want me to put my face as the 10th prince? It's fine if you don't ride me, but you put these tattered scriptures on my back. I clearly told you that I have a dragon shell here. Isn't it better to put these tattered scriptures in the dragon shell than anything else? If you don't have a Chenkuan bag, but with our friendship, I can give this dragon shell to you." Chapter 4274. Amitabha. Chun Zong did not even turn his head as he chanted the name of Buddha and continued to walk forward. The Confucian cultivator behind Yuan Tongtian retracted his gaze from the distant scenery and glanced at the dragon horse behind Chun Zong. He sneered and said, "One of the requirements of sutra seeking in nirvana is for a monk without any divine powers to walk step by step to Leiyin Temple, then from Leiyin Temple to Longevity Town. If the monk rides you, how can he seek in nirvana? I really don't know what the East Sea Dragon Palace is thinking. Since they want you to get a share of sutra seeking in nirvana, why do they want you to transform into a dragon horse? Even if you meet demons, you can't fight them. You can only be a decoration. Could it be that you've made a mistake and you can only be a horse before you make up for it? Damn it!" Hearing the Confucian cultivator's words, the dragon horse jumped up like a cat whose tail was stepped on. He turned his head and shouted, "Who said I made a mistake? Who said I made a mistake? Do you think I want to accompany you here and walk around like a lunatic? I'm willing to wear the white dragon suit and turn into a horse. What can you do about it? Being a horse for the monk is the dragon palace giving face to the Buddha Lord and the Immortal Emperor. Besides, the monk is not a monk without any divine powers. He has been walking for more than 200 years. If he didn't have any divine powers, he would have turned into a skeleton." "Shut up!" Yuan Tongtian scolded impatiently. "If you two continue to talk nonsense, do you believe that I won't beat the two of you to death? How dare you, how dare you?" The dragon horse became more anxious and shouted, "Why don't you try beating me? Why don't you try beating me? You're just a fire ape with no background. Just because you flattered the monk earlier, you actually became my senior brother. Why don't you take a piss and look at your own face? What qualifications do you have to be my senior brother?" Amitabha. Chun Zong, who was walking in front, finally could not stand it anymore. He turned his head and scolded, "Zhen Feng, you broke the mouth precept again." "Bah!" The dragon horse who was called Zhen Feng spat. A big mouthful of dragon saliva fell into the snow and smashed a big hole in the ground. Then he continued to scold. I violated many commandments. Not only the verbal commandments, but also the commandments of anger, lust, and so on. When Chunzong heard this, his expression changed. He said indifferently, if that's the case, then Oh, master. Longma Zhenfeng hurriedly changed the topic and trotted over to Chunzong, saying with a smile, Disciple was just playing with senior brothers. Don't you feel that it's very lonely in the wilderness and the sea of snow? Wouldn't you be happy if your disciple and senior brother were to entertain you? Then Dragon Horse Zhenfeng turned around and said to the scholarly cultivator as if asking for help, Isn't that right, senior martial brother Zhenhan? Zhenhan's face was filled with contempt and disdain, but he still said, That's right, junior brother's temper is like this. He also wants to do something for master and doesn't want to lose face in front of master. Master doesn't look at the monk's face but looks at the Buddha's face. You don't look at merit but look at hard work. No matter what, he has accompanied master for more than 100 years. From the Eastern Sea to the Western Paradise and then to the Lane Temple. He can be considered to have worked hard. Now that the four of us have obtained the sutra, we're already on our way back. You're kicking him out of the sect for such a small matter. Isn't that too unreasonable? Zhenhan, do you really think so? Yuan Tongtian's eyes were filled with ridicule as he couldn't help but ask. Zhenkong. Seeing the change in the expressions of Longma Zhenfeng and Confucian Zhenhan, Chunzong hurriedly rubbed his stomach and said, Master is a bit hungry. There's no village or shop here. I don't know where I can find food. Can you find something for master to eat? Yes, master. Chunzong immediately agreed. Then he glanced at Longma Zhenfeng and Confucian Zhenhan and said indifferently, You two protect master, I'll be back soon. Go, go. Zhenhan waved his hand indifferently. This nirvana is a pure land of Buddhism. How could there be any demon race or Taoist cultivators? That's right. Go quickly. If you starve master, can you bear the responsibility? Longma Zhenfeng echoed. Yuan Tongtian, whose Buddhist name is Zhenkong, slightly raised the corner of his mouth. A demon cloud appeared under his feet and he flew away. After Yuan Tongtian left, Chunzong opened his mouth and said, Amitba, Zhenfeng, what you're carrying isn't some junk. It's my Buddha's Mahayana Buddhist scripture. This Buddhist scripture is the hope of hundreds of millions of bodhisattvas in hidden immortal continent. It's also the goal of the four of us. I know you want to show your filial piety to me and don't want me to be burdened like this. However, this Mahayana Buddhist scripture is 100 times more important than me. You can obtain more merit by carrying this Buddhist scripture than carrying me. You don't need to compete with Zhenhan and Zhenkong in subduing demons. You only need to protect this Mahayana Buddhist scripture. It's stronger than anything else. That's right. Master, you're right. Zhenhan also said with a faint smile, Zhenfeng, my Chenkuan pouch contains the scriptures of the 100 schools of Confucianism. If you're willing, you can also put it on your back. This merit will definitely be greater. Zhenfeng was originally furious. However, when he saw the sincerity on Chunzang's face, he hurriedly changed his tone and said with a smile, Senior brother, don't joke with little brother. If little brother takes away your merit, won't your military school fall out with my dragon palace? Wouldn't senior brother's trip to Lane Temple be in vain? Wouldn't you have seen Mahavairocana's face in vain? Seeing that Zhenfeng was no longer angry, Zhenhan also felt bored and didn't answer. Instead, she raised her head and looked at the surrounding snowy scenery. Her gaze was attracted by a snowy peak in the distant valley. After Chunzong finished explaining, he didn't care if Zhenfeng listened or not. He looked at the place where Yuan Tongtian disappeared with some concern. Then, he took his staff and walked forward. After walking for a few li, he saw a gurgling stream under the snow at the foot of the mountain. Chunzong licked his dry lips and said, Zhenkong. However, just as he opened his mouth, he smiled bitterly. Standing there, he turned his head and called out to the draconic horse, Zhenfeng, come here. Yes, master. The draconic horse Zhenfeng quickly walked in front of Chunzong and asked, What's the matter? Nothing. Chunzong smiled and walked to the side of the draconic horse. He reached into the oilcloth and took out a purple gold alms bowl. Then, he walked to the side of the stream and bent down to get some water. He placed it by his mouth and drank a few mouthfuls. "Ayo, master." The draconic horse Zhenfeng made a fuss and said, "No matter what, you should wait for senior brother Zhenkong to come back. If you drink cold water like this, it won't be good for you to have diarrhea. Even if you don't have diarrhea, if you feel uncomfortable anywhere, senior brother Zhenkong will beat us to death." After drinking a few mouthfuls, Chunzong clearly couldn't endure the bone-piercing cold. His face was a little pale and he hurriedly poured the snow water in the purple gold alms bowl. Just as he was about to turn around, he saw the little spirit mouse standing on the mountain peak. At this moment, there was already some snow on the spirit mouse's body. Its body was trembling and its eyes were filled with fear as it stared at the draconic horse. Sigh. Chunzong sighed and put down the purple gold alms bowl. With a slightly reproachful voice he said, "Zhenfeng, you're being naughty again." After saying that, Chunzong carefully crossed the stream and climbed up the mountain peak with difficulty. It was very strenuous for him to carry the spirit mouse out of the ice and snow. However, just as his hand was about to touch the spirit mouse, his foot slipped and his body slipped down. Chunzong naturally lowered his head. The moment he lowered his head, the spirit mouse that was originally terrified suddenly grew in size. A demon race shadow that was dozens of feet in size rushed out from its small body. Things happened too suddenly. Draconic horse Zhen Feng and Confucian cultivator Zhen Han didn't expect that there was a demon race hidden within the spirit beast. Their faces turned pale with fright. Just as they were about to make a move, an extremely familiar voice sounded in the air. "Master, be careful." Immediately, a wave of staff shadows appeared out of thin air and fell on the demon race's shadow. The shadow didn't have time to resist before all the shadows were smashed into the spirit mouse's body. Finally, a pitch-black magic staff appeared in the wave of staff shadows and hit the spirit mouse's head. Pooh! With a light sound, the little spirit mouse was smashed into a pile of meat paste by the magic staff. "Damn it!" Draconic horse Zhen Feng let out a long breath and cursed. Another demon beast that was fooled by rumors. If this monk could become immortal after eating it, how could it be your turn? This daddy will be the first to eat it. Humph, do you still need to say it? Confucian cultivator Zhan Han coldly snorted. Of course it's your demon race's great sage. They don't want to see the sutra-seeking extreme bliss be completed smoothly. If they don't cause some trouble, how can they be at ease? What does the demon race's great sage have to do with my dragon palace of the 4 seas? This daddy thinks. It's your Confucian family. Draconic horse Zhen Feng retorted. They don't want the sutra-seeking extreme bliss to be completed. Zhen Kong. Chunzong didn't care about the two's battle of words. His face was a bit green as he looked at the sky with an unkind tone and asked, "What are you doing? Why are you starting a massacre again?" At this moment, Yuan Tongtian had already descended from the sky with a tall peach tree on his back. The large peaches on the branches looked very tempting. Hearing Chun Zhang's question, Yuan Tongtian didn't care and casually replied, "That's a demon race's phantom beast. He's hiding in the spirit mouse's body and wants to eat you." "How is that possible?" Chunzong looked at the mangled corpse of the spirit mouse and was so angry that his lips trembled. Master was clearly looking at the spirit mouse. When did the phantom beast appear? Monk. Yuan Tongtian sized up Chunzong and said, "That phantom beast appeared when you lowered your head. You don't have spirit sense and don't know the eye-clearing technique, so naturally you can't see it. If you don't believe me, you can ask your 2 disciples." Chapter 4275. Ahem ahem. Senior brother Zhenhan, your battle armor looks really mighty. I wonder which blacksmith master of the Immortal Palace forged it? Draconic horse Zhen Feng coughed and looked at the armor he had been looking at for close to 200 years. He seemed to have discovered something strange and hurriedly asked Zhen Han. Zhen Han said in all seriousness, "Is there a need to ask? Naturally, it was forged by the #1 blacksmith master in the world." "Oh, why don't you guess who the #1 blacksmith master in the world is?" "Ayaya, this is not easy to guess." Draconic horse Zhen Feng's face was as if he was thinking hard. Seeing Zhen Feng and Zhen Han talking about him, Zhen Kong smiled coldly and didn't say anything else. However, Chunzong didn't intend to let him go and said, "Zhen Kong, even if there was a phantom beast, it was enough that you subdued it. There was no need to kill it, right? Moreover, this spirit rat wasn't a phantom beast. What was the point of killing it?" Monk. Zhen Kong was somewhat impatient and said with a frown, "My strength is limited. It's not possible for me to subdue the phantom beast without injuring you. It's already not bad that I was able to kill it before it could kill you. Zhen Kong, how many times have I told you in the past 200 years? Buddhist disciples should be compassionate and respect life. When we need help, we should always be kind. When we sweep the floor, we're afraid of harming the lives of ants. We should cover the lamp with gauze to protect the moths. Why did you kill it step by step? Although this spirit rat wasn't a human, it was still a life. What was the point of killing this innocent spirit rat and obtaining the General Sutra?" "Monk." Zhen Kong seemed to be used to this, and he didn't get angry. He only said, "The phantom beast has already borrowed the spirit rat's flesh, so killing the phantom beast is equivalent to killing the spirit rat. Moreover, even if I don't touch the spirit rat after killing the phantom beast, it won't live past today." "That's right. Since you knew that the spirit rat would die if the phantom beast died, why didn't you think of a way to subdue the phantom beast?" Chun Zong asked in a somewhat forceful manner. "It's good to have this phantom beast submit to our Buddhist sect. Monk, I've already beaten and killed those that should be killed. Tell me what to do." Zhen Kong was so angry that he laughed and retorted, "You have no idea how many living beings you have killed along the way." Chuan Zong sighed. "You always say that there will be no next time, but when have you ever taken those words to heart? I just want to ask you, will you do it again next time?" "Monk." Zhen Kong tossed the peach tree to the ground and calmly replied, "Don't ask me about this. Ask the demons and humans who want to take your life. As long as they don't want your life, I definitely won't do anything. But if they want to hurt you, I won't show any mercy." Hearing Zhen Kong's words, compassion appeared in Chun Zhang's eyes. All the living beings who had died under Zhen Kong's magic wand in the past 200 years appeared in his mind. He could not help but say, "Since that's the case, you go." "Ayo, master." Seeing that Chun Zong was about to chase Zhen Kong away, Zhen Han hurriedly took a few steps forward and plucked a peach from the peach tree. She handed it to Chun Zong and smiled. "Look, the peach senior brother found is even more juicy than the immortal peaches in the Immortal Palace. Why don't you try it?" Chun Zong looked at the juicy peach. In the end, he could not harden his heart and sighed. "Forget it. This is the last time. If there is a next time, I don't need to say anything." "Whatever." Xian Kong did not care at all. He waved his hand as if he was chasing away a fly. "Do whatever you want. If it wasn't for master." Zhen Kong immediately stopped and looked at Zhen Feng and Zhen Han. The two of them perked up their ears and waited for him to continue. Thus, Zhen Kong shut his mouth for a moment and continued. "Otherwise, who would have the patience to protect you for 200 years? Zhen Feng and Zhen Han could not help but feel slightly disappointed when they saw Zhen Kong being so tight-lipped. They glanced at each other and sneered. They had the same question. Just where did Zhen Kong come from? Just which great saint was behind him? However, it had been more than 200 years and they did not see any clues. In Chun Zhang's eyes, the so-called sutra seeking extreme bliss was a process of seeking the gospel for the millions of Buddhist people in the hidden immortal continent. However, in Zhen Feng and Zhen Han's eyes, it might not be so. Perhaps, it was just a game to obtain merits and benefits. Therefore, it was very important to have a place in the sutra seeking extreme bliss. In fact, long before Chun Zong took down the Buddhist decree in the Tidal River Temple, the Immortal Palace and Leiyin Temple had already discussed this matter. However, this matter did not only involve Buddhism and Confucianism, it also involved the Immortal Palace and various Confucian families and even the demon race. Even when Chun Zong began his sutra-seeking extreme bliss journey in the Longevity Town, he did not arrange everything properly. In particular, right after Chun Zong left, Xiao Hua had a dispute with Sun Ping who was waiting for him at the Liao River. Although the two left the Longevity Town very quickly, the imprint of the Immortal Palace was unavoidable. Therefore, the matter that was already settled changed again. It was not until more than a year after Chun Zong left the Longevity Town that a group of forces suddenly discovered that Chun Zong had actually accepted a demon race disciple. This disciple seemed to have been accepted overnight, and it also seemed to have been arranged long ago. However, the Buddhist sect and the Confucian cultivators did not receive any message from the demon race. Seeing that the demon race had already made the first move, the Confucian cultivators and the Buddhist sect did not dare to delay any longer. On one hand, They arranged for an envoy to go to the Thousand Demons' sacred realm to denounce the great saint of the demon race for not acting according to the agreement. On the other hand, they hurriedly arranged for Chun Zhang's disciple. Chun Zhang originally had 3 disciples. One was a demon race disciple, one was a Buddhist, and one was a Confucian cultivator. The Confucian cultivator disciple should be the eldest senior brother. On the hidden immortal continent, he was the first to accept Chun Zhang as a nominal protector. After that, he went to the Nirvana world and accepted the second Buddhist as a real Buddhist disciple. As for the demon race disciple, he was arranged in the Nirvana world. After being subdued by the Confucian cultivator disciple and the Buddhist sect disciple, he surrendered to the Buddhist sect. Yuan Tongtian's appearance was good. He took the eldest senior brother's position. This Confucian cultivator could only be the second senior brother. The second senior brother was Zhenhan. He was originally the son of the military family and was called Sun Zihan. The status of this Confucian cultivator disciple originally did not belong to the Sun family. Instead, the Immortal Palace gave it to the Dongfang, Shimin, Nangong, and Baiming, 4 big families. However, the status of the eldest senior brother was already gone. The enthusiasm of the 4 big families to compete for the status also disappeared instantly. The 4 big families also did not have any disciples who were willing to be a Fire Ape's junior brother. Therefore, the status was given to the Sun family again. Under the instruction of the Immortal Palace, the Sun family chose Sun Zihan. At first, Sun Zihan was convinced by Yuan Tongtian. However, in the end, it was because of Yuan Tongtian that he had the opportunity to enter the Nirvana world to seek scriptures. He was still grateful to Yuan Tongtian from the bottom of his heart. Therefore, on the hidden immortal continent, he was courteous to Yuan Tongtian. However, the essence of this kind of courtesy was a kind of pride as a human cultivator. However, in the following few years, Yuan Tongtian's protection of Chuanzong came from the bottom of his heart. He even risked his own life to save Chuanzong. It was very different from what he thought. Zhenhan could not help but feel a little surprised. Moreover, Yuan Tongtian did not care about some of his little tricks at all. Even if he was captured by some Taoist cultivators and wanted to kill him in front of Yuan Tongtian turned a deaf ear to it. Therefore, Zhenhan was completely relieved of Yuan Tongtian. Moreover, this demon clan's Yuan Tongtian was indeed very resourceful. He was much more powerful than Zhenhan. On the hidden immortal continent, almost all the work was done by Yuan Tongtian. He did not need Zhenhan at all. After watching for a while, Zhenhan got used to it. He also adjusted his attitude. Being the second senior brother was fine. Anyway, he was also here to gain merit. However, at this time, strange news came from the Thousand Demons' sacred territory. The demon clan's great sage did not take action at all. The disciples arranged by the demon clan were still waiting to be subdued by the Confucian cultivators and Buddhist sect disciples. Chaos, chaos. This was Zhenhan's mood when he heard the news from the Immortal Palace that day. He was almost impulsive that day. He wanted to ask Yuan Tongtian where he came from. Could it be that he jumped out of a stone? However, as a Confucian disciple, he still had the self-restraint and patience. He did not open his mouth and only watched coldly. The Immortal Palace and the Buddhist sect were shocked when they received the news. They never thought that there would be a fourth force besides the demon race, the Confucian cultivators, and the Buddhist sect that would disrupt their plans. The first thing they thought of was the Tao sect cultivator who called himself the primordial chaos ancestor. However, they did not understand how the Grand Mist ancestor could know about the arrangement of the sutra seeking nirvana. How could he send such a powerful fire ape in advance? What made them even more dumbfounded was that whether it was the Immortal Palace or the Great Thunderclap Temple, they could not find the origin of the fire ape. Even if they used great magical powers, they could not find Yuan Tongtian's origin. They could not find any cause and effect. This fire ape was really as Sun Zihan thought. It was like a stone that fell from the sky. Naturally, the Immortal Palace and the Buddhist sect had the intention to kill Yuan Tongtian. However, they also saw clearly that the one who really protected Chunzong was Yuan Tongtian. Zhenhan also said clearly that Yuan Tongtian was not interested in the merit of the sutra seeking nirvana. He only cared about Chunzang's safety. Moreover, the one who accepted Yuan Tongtian was Chunzong himself. In other words, this was Chunzang's own choice. It had nothing to do with the Buddhist sect, Confucian cultivators, or the demon clan. Since it was Chunzang's choice, the Buddhist sect and Confucian cultivators had to consider more for Chunzang. After all, the heavenly Tao was flawed. Out of 50, one would escape. Perhaps Chunzang was that one who escaped. In the end, the one who settled this matter was naturally the Mahavairakana revered Buddha. The Buddha Lord formed a Buddha seal with his hands. The Buddha light penetrated the heaven and earth. After a few days, the Mahavairakana revered Buddha's eyes flashed with a strange expression. He said, "Since he wants to come, let him come." Then, the Mahavairakana revered Buddha did not say anything more. He did not give any explanation at all. Since the Buddha Lord of the Buddhist sect did not object, the Immortal Palace naturally had no reason to object. Yuan Tongtian, the disciple with the Buddha name Zhenkong, sat in the position of the eldest senior brother. Chapter 4276. Since there was Yuan Tongtian, there would be a demon disciple for the sutra seeking extreme bliss. The demon who was destined to be subdued. His tragic fate would be changed. He would not be beaten by others. He would be subdued by others. However, there was a problem again. The demons were unhappy. This was already agreed upon. How could it be changed just like that? Were they bullying the demons for being inhumane? The Immortal Palace was in a dilemma. There was only so much merit. If there was one more person to share, everyone would have less. The Immortal Palace felt that the Buddhist sect might not be willing. However, to the surprise of the Immortal Palace and the demons, the Buddhist sect made a rare concession in the face of the demons' persistence. The Buddhist sect did not arrange for the Bodhisattva to perform the sutra seeking extreme bliss. There were still 4 of them. However, the Buddhist sect had a condition. This demon disciple could not be a demon from the 1,000 demons sacred realm. The Buddhist sect's reasoning was reasonable. With one less Buddhist disciple, Chunzang's merit would be doubled. The demons already had a disciple. Of course, they could not share any extra merit. Otherwise, wouldn't the demons benefit the most from the sutra seeking extreme bliss? It was unknown if there was something fishy between the Dragon Island and the Buddhist sect or if fate had really landed on the Dragon Island. On the 3 continents, other than the Immortal Palace, the Thunder Temple, and the Great Sage Temple, there was only the Dragon Island left. The 3rd disciple was given to the Dragon Island. Of course, the Dragon Island could not send a dragon to be Chunzang's disciple. Therefore, the title was given to the Dragon Palace of the 4 Seas. There were many dragons in the Dragon Palace of the 4 Seas. However, there were not many who could match the status of Sun Zihan. There was no need to mention the princes of the Dragon Palace of the 4 Seas. None of them would lower their status to be a disciple of a Buddhist sect's bodhisattva. The Dragon Palace of the 4 Seas could not send out an ordinary dragon general. They had to send a leader of the dragon guards. Just as the Immortal Palace was waiting with interest for the Dragon Palace to send out a disciple, Ao Feng appeared. The 10th prince of the Dragon Palace of the East Sea. Everyone knew that the dragon had 9 sons. Each dragon palace only had 9 princes. It was impossible to have one more. This was the legacy of the dragons for many years. However, the Dragon Palace of the East Sea had this 10th prince. The Immortal Palace didn't know how the 10th crown prince came about, but from the Dragon Island's Book of Dragons, it was recorded long ago. It was something that happened before the sutra seeking of extreme bliss. In other words, Ao Feng's birth had nothing to do with the sutra seeking of extreme bliss. Since the 10th prince had nothing to do with nirvana scripture seeking, the Immortal Palace immediately understood the reason why the 10th prince revealed his identity. Whether it was the Dragon Island or the East Sea Dragon Palace, one of them must have found the Lei Temple and given Ao Feng the opportunity to appear in the 3 continents, giving him the opportunity to be recognized by the dragon tribe. Therefore, the Immortal Palace didn't pursue the matter further and agreed to let Ao Feng be the last disciple of the sutra seeking extreme bliss. Moreover, the Immortal Palace didn't propose any other conditions. However, when Ao Feng appeared in front of her, Zhan Han's jaw almost dropped to the ground. Where did the Dragon General and the 10th Prince of the Dragon King go? Why is there only one dragon horse? Didn't they say that Chuanzong could only rely on his own strength to travel from Longevity Town to Lei Temple and then back to Longevity Town from Lei Temple? The East Sea Dragon Palace sent a dragon horse over. It could not carry Chuanzong, nor could it fight. How could it split the merit? Could it be that they were planning to sit back and enjoy the fruits of others' labor? Unfortunately, although this dragon horse Zhenfeng was very lively and often caused trouble, he was very tight-lipped about his origin, and even what had happened. No matter how much Zhen Han asked, he still didn't get an answer. After a long time, Zhen Han also lost his patience. After all, the dragon horse Zhenfeng wasn't the only one who was slacking. Wasn't he also hiding behind Zhen Kong and slacking off? It was enough to have Zhen Kong as the eldest senior brother in the sutra seeking extreme bliss. Who cares what Zhenfeng thought? However, when the four of them arrived at the Leiyin temple and saw the Mahayana scriptures such as the Nirvana Sutra, the Bodhisattva Sutra, and other Mahayana scriptures to Chuanzong, Zhen Han suddenly understood everything. He was instantly filled with admiration for the Leiyin temple and the Dragon Palace. Because the Leiyin temple had clearly stated that the Mahayana Sutra was the breath of the Buddha Lord. No utensils could taint it. Therefore, the Chenkuan pouch, the Chenkuan bracelet, and the dragon shell couldn't be used. They could only be carried by the dragon clan with the bloodline of the heavenly dragon. His grandmother, what kind of reason was this? This was clearly giving merit to dragon horse Zhenfeng. Unfortunately, this dragon horse Zhenfeng seemed to be a simpleton. He didn't understand anything and only wanted to carry Chuanzong. Zhen Han wished he could knock dragon horse Zhenfeng's head on behalf of the Dragon King of the Eastern Sea Dragon Palace. Did you know that your father had done so much for you? Today, Chuanzong was forced to tell the truth. Looking at dragon horse Zhenfeng's attitude, he didn't seem to care at all. Zhen Han couldn't help but despise him. However, Zhen Han couldn't help but defend Zhenfeng. After all, two people slacking off. It was better than one person being inconspicuous. As for Chuanzong's origin and the relationship between Chuanzong and Zhen Kong, even though Zhen Han had followed them for more than 200 years, he still didn't understand. It wasn't only Zhen Han who was confused. Even the Immortal Palace was shrouded in fog. No one could see the truth. Long before Chuanzong revealed the Buddhist decree, or even when Chuanzong might reveal the Buddhist decree, the Immortal Palace had already begun to investigate Chuanzong's origin. However, the result left the Immortal Palace very puzzled. Chuanzong was like a Buddha descending from the heavens, riding on the wooden basin of nirvana. Before the small golden river of the Golden Mountain Temple, Chuanzong's shadow didn't seem to exist in the pure land of ultimate bliss. Since then, Chuanzong's shadow seemed to have covered the entire pure land of ultimate bliss. Moreover, everything was seen clearly by the Immortal Palace. There weren't any traces of the Mahavairocana revered Buddha doing anything. Chuanzong appeared out of thin air. Of course, not to mention the Immortal Palace. Even Zhen Han didn't believe that Chuanzong had no relationship with the Mahavairocana revered Buddha. Otherwise, how could such great merit be given to Chuanzong? However, the experience of the past 200 years told Zhen Han the truth. Chuanzong didn't know the truth behind this pure land of ultimate bliss. This wasn't the final truth. The truth that Zhen Han didn't understand the most was that Chuanzong didn't seem to recognize Zhen Kong, who had risked his life to protect her. Not only did Chuanzong treat Zhen Kong, Zhen Han, and Zhenfeng equally, he was also very dissatisfied with Zhen Kong killing monsters and Taoist cultivators. Since a long time ago, he had been talking non-stop about chasing Zhen Kong away. Zhen Han was about to go crazy. For the sake of Zhen Kong, the Buddhist sect, the Immortal Palace, and the monster race had engaged in a game. Dragon Island had even joined in. Now that the candidate for the pure land of ultimate bliss had been decided, you actually wanted to change it. Did you think that you had the final say in this pure land of ultimate bliss? Moreover, if Zhen Kong was chased away, the heavy responsibility of eliminating monsters and demons would fall on Zhen Han's shoulders. How could Zhen Han be willing? Although the outcome of the pure land of ultimate bliss had been decided, no one could guarantee the process. Anything that one worried about would definitely happen. Didn't you see how the powerful Xian Kong was almost killed by the Taoist cultivators he had arranged? Zhen Han couldn't guarantee that the Taoist cultivators sent out from the Panglai Immortal Realm wouldn't have the guts to kill her when they saw her, a Confucian cultivator, before the Immortal Palace made their move. In particular, a secret that, I won't tell you if you're not familiar with him, had suddenly spread throughout the 3 continents. It was said that Chuanzong was the reincarnation of a bodhisattva from the Buddhist kingdom. Anyone who could eat a piece of Chuanzong's flesh would gain immortality. Human cultivators were still fine, But the monsters in the Thousand Demons sacred realm couldn't resist this temptation. One after another, they rushed out from their secluded lairs, wanting to realize their beautiful dream of immortality. Although he didn't know where this rumor came from, the effect of this rumor was obvious. Without the Immortal Palace and the Thunder Temple urging the Great Sage Hall to create a few demons and ghosts, the real calamities came one after another. Although the Immortal Palace and Thunder Temple's defenses were tight, if a monster like Jianghu could become their disciple, then a monster like the Phantom Beast could also get close. If it wasn't for the powerful eldest senior brother Jianghu blocking in front of her, Jianghu might have died several times already. Therefore, even if Jianghu knew that Jianghu looked down on her, she still tried her best to protect Jianghu, helping Xuanzang, who only wanted to pursue the truth of Buddhism, to see the reality clearly. Seeing that Xuanzang and Jianghu had a falling out again, and Jianghu really had the momentum of not daring to do anything, Jianghu gave Zhenfeng a look and hurriedly said, "Master, please calm down first. This is all my disciple's fault. Eldest senior brother went to look for food for you, but we actually squabbled on the side, causing you to be in danger. Come, quickly try this peach. It's really delicious." "That's right, master." Dragon Horse Zhenfeng also said, "Eldest senior brother has worked hard and made great contributions. For the past 200 years, haven't we relied on eldest senior brother's abilities to safely reach this place? Seeing that the Western Paradise is about to end, and we have to return to the hidden immortal continent, how can you bear to let eldest senior brother leave? Just now, not to mention eldest senior brother, even my heart was about to jump out. After all, that Phantom Beast had already pounced on Master's head. In just a few breaths, Master will really enter the cycle of reincarnation. Isn't eldest senior brother anxious to save Master? Of course, we Buddhist disciples cannot stain our hands with blood. Eldest senior brother is also in the wrong. Look, even if eldest senior brother doesn't say anything now, he is already regretting it." It was rare for two disobedient disciples to speak up for Jianghu, so Xuanzang's heart moved a little. He took the peach that Jianghu passed to him and took a small bite. A sweet peach juice entered his mouth, and Xuanzang's anger subsided a little. However, when he looked at Jianghu again, he saw that Jianghu was looking at the sky, seemingly in the direction of the Golden Mountain Temple. He didn't know what Jianghu was thinking. Although Jianghu didn't say anything, the regret in Jianghu's words clearly didn't exist. Xuanzang opened his mouth, wanting to say something, but he had already said enough in the past 200 years. What was the use of him saying anything more? For a moment, his heart felt stifled. He wasn't an idiot. 200 years was enough for him to see some of the truth about the Western Paradise scripture-seeking. However, he didn't care. After all, the Mahayana Buddhist scripture he obtained was a real thing. Being able to let the Buddhist sect's Buddhist light illuminate the longevity town was his greatest hope for this trip. However, what was his greatest hope? In this world, there was probably no one who could understand it. Not even Mahavairakana. You're tuning in to the Wisdom Diary YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.